and I'm the city councilor for the city of St. Louis, and I am pleased to call to order the first ever meeting of the Charter Commission organized for and on behalf of the people of the city of St. Louis. The time is now 5:39, and I'm joined by and happy to introduce Karen Shagog over there in the corner and Eddie Roth. Both are my teammates in the city councilor's office and will be your primary staff for the St. Louis City Charter Commission. I have requested that Ms. Shagog take notes for this meeting and assist the commission's secretary once that secretary is elected in preparing our official minutes of the meeting. This is, of course, a public meeting, and I'm pleased to welcome the members of the public who have joined us here this evening. We are in the large conference room number 2 at 1520 Market, and we are also joined by guests virtually because this meeting is being live streamed on STL TV and on the St. Louis City's YouTube channel. We want to give a special thank you to our partners at STL TV who are here serving us this evening. Our first agenda item includes a roll call, and when you hear your name, please say here or present. Ms. Shagog, would you please call the roll of the commissioners?
Brianna Bovo.
Present.
Anna Crossland.
Present.
David Dwight IV. Reginald Dart.
Present.
Christopher Grant.
Present.
Scott Intagliata.
Present.
Jasmine Nolan.
Present.
Anthony Riley.
Present.
And Travis Sheridan.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Shagog. With 8 of the 9 voting members present, we have a quorum. Thank you all for your willingness to serve the city of St. Louis in this capacity as commissioners. Ms. Shagog, would you also call the roll for our ex officio and non-voting members of the commission?
Director Casey Milberg as designee Mayor Tashara Jones.
Present.
Honorable Darlene Green.
And Comptroller Green has notified my office that she's unable to attend in person this meeting and will be observing our live stream.
Director Christine Ingracia as designee of President Megan Green.
Present.
Alderman Joseph Balmer.
And Alderman Vollmer has notified my office that he will be unable to attend as well.
City Councilor Sheena Hamilton.
Present.
Director Sonia Gray. Present. Mr. Jay Connell, President of the Missouri AFL-CIO and Labor Representative.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll turn to our second agenda item, which is the discussion and approval of rules of order and procedure. I circulated via email to all of our voting and non-voting members a 3-page draft of rules of order and procedure on August the 23rd to review and consider. And I will now entertain a motion to approve those rules, and after the motion is seconded, open the floor for any discussion that the body would like to have.
So moved. Second.
Okay. It has been moved and properly seconded that the proposed rules of order and procedure are adopted. Is there any discussion, any questions regarding those rules?
I have one question. Section 1. The duties of the executive committee shall be to coordinate with commission staff. How do you define the word coordinate? What does that mean?
So we do want to make sure, my opinion of this is that we want to make sure that everybody's working together on the dates, which is one of the agenda items that we have here. And they can get a hold of you, and they need to get a hold of you to schedule meetings or get whatever questions that we have answered. Occasionally, the city, for example, will get sunshine law requests for public records, so people may ask for copies of documents that the commission received or things like that, and the commission staff will need to coordinate you to respond and meet our obligations under the law.
Thank you. No other questions.
Any other discussion regarding the proposed rules? All right. So I believe we are ready for a vote on those if there is no further discussion. So all who are in favor of adopting our proposed rules of order and procedure, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All opposed? No? Okay. So the motion carries, and I will note based on the rules that we've just adopted, we need 5 votes in favor for commission action to proceed. And with the rules now being in place, we can turn to the third item on our agenda, which is discussion, nomination, and election of officers. The rules of order and procedure call for 3 officers: the president, the vice president, the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. So I will now entertain any nominations that we may have from the floor for chair.
I'll nominate myself for chair.
I would be willing to serve as vice chair, so for vice chair.
Any other nominations? Okay. So the nominee that we have for chair is Commissioner Nolan Eccles. Do we have a second for that nomination?
I second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of Commissioner Nolan Eccles serving as chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, congratulations, Commissioner Nolan Eccles, as the inaugural chair of the St. Louis City Charter Commission. And with you having been elected as chair, at this point, the rules of order and procedure are in place, and you would be leading the meeting. Would you like me to conclude the elections before you take the helm?
Yes.
Okay. Now, moving on to vice chair, we have one nominee, Commissioner Sheridan. Do we have any other nominations? Do we have a second for Commissioner
I second.
Sheridan? Okay. It has been moved and properly seconded that Commissioner Sheridan will serve as vice chair of the commission. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Congratulations, Commissioner Sheridan, on being our vice chair. Are there any nominations for the office of secretary? We'll help you along, by the way.
I would like to nominate myself.
All right, okay, very good. Any other nominations for secretary? Do we have a second for Commissioner Bobo?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and properly seconded that Commissioner Bobo will serve as secretary of the commission. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, the motion carries, or the vote carries, I should say. Congratulations, Commissioner Bobo, on your office of secretary. At this point, I will turn it over to our chair for the remaining agenda items, the first of which is a discussion of meeting dates.
For the discussion of meeting dates and setting dates, the regular monthly meetings, do we have any discussion on what we believe our regular meeting dates should be, including times?
I'll propose to open up the month with our meeting, so that it's the primary thing on our minds and for the city, just as an easy way to remember when they take place.
Sorry, what was that again?
So beginning of the first week of the month, so sometime the first Tuesday, first Thursday, open the month with our monthly meeting.
I would like to just sort of add to that, perhaps maybe Thursday evenings.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think as long as it's consistent and we have a standard time, and if you can't be here, you can participate by Zoom, and that said, yeah, I think that if we did it the first week, though, do we want to skip next Thursday or hold the meeting next Thursday? So, which,
This is the first week.
Yeah, I think it's first.
Yeah.
Get the grace there.
we move straight to October, I guess, as well as our first.
We have to hold a meeting in September, though.
Okay,
And we need 2 weeks for public notice, is that correct?
see you next Thursday.
So,
Let's need 24 hours for public notice.
Okay.
so first Thursday at 5:30, beginning next week.
Let's see. Any other opinion, perspective on set dates for meetings?
It depends more on the, Thursdays is going to be hard, but Tuesdays and Wednesdays are easier in terms of obligations and stuff. I don't know about the rest of you, but there are no days that are going to be good, and so if we can block them out in advance far enough, then at least we can get a majority of the time, I think, of all of us on there, for each meeting. But yeah, Thursdays are a little worse than other days.
Yeah, earlier in the week seems to be, I have a little bit more control over my schedule.
Yeah,
Earlier in the week
yeah.
than things getting away from me.
Thursday is heading into the weekend already, and it gets crazy.
Would Wednesday work for people?
Yes,
Wednesday
Wednesday
is
definitely
the
would.
best day for me.
Wednesday would work.
Yeah, Wednesday, I think this is Wednesday, right?
Today is
Yes.
Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday's better.
How long do we plan our meetings to be? I can meet on Wednesday until 6:30.
How long?
Yeah.
We're talking Wednesday
Correct.
evening,
I
starting
teach
at
on
what
Wednesdays.
time?
I teach at 7, so anything before 6:30 would be wonderful. 5:30, 5 o'clock?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to remind everybody to speak into the mics, otherwise people at home will not be able to hear. So if you could pull the mic in front of you.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
I'm like, you're doing
We're
the-
new to this.
Project into it.
It's been a while.
Okay.
Okay,
To respond
so-
to that, I would be available Wednesdays anytime after 4:30 PM.
Yeah. That's the other thing, is that 5:30 is an awkward time because, you either run and get dinner beforehand or it's really late. And so I would be willing to come earlier, but I don't know if other people would be able to, just so that we could finish and then go.
I would say for our general meetings, that would be okay, but for our public hearings, and
Right.
I know we're not on the public hearing section yet, but on the public hearings, I'll make sure that we're sensitive. to
Right,
you.
right.
4:30 would work for me.
Right. Well, then it might be for the public hearings that we would want to go to 7 or something so that we could allow people some time to break before they come in.
I think that's part 2.
So we're going to meet the first Wednesday of the month from 4:30 till 6 o'clock is the consensus here. Does that work for everybody?
It's required 2 hours.
It takes however long you all want to take. And you can discuss whether you want to do it in person or virtually or whatever you prefer.
Do you guys want to do in person or virtual, or you want to keep it hybrid?
I would prefer to meet in person for topics like this. It is only one meeting a month. I would hope we could try to be available, but I think we should have a virtual option and people's schedules
Yes.
or travel would allow it.
Well, and I think also with the winter coming up, it would be good to have an alternate, a Zoom option or something in case the weather doesn't permit being able to come down here. And so we could state that we'd like to have the meeting in person with caveats.
So we're gonna keep the hybrid, where we're in person. If you can't come in person, then we're going to, the other option is the Zoom. And we're looking at Wednesdays, regular meetings, 4:30,
First Wednesday of the month?
first Wednesday of the month. First Wednesday of the month, 4:30. We're looking at an hour, no more than 2 hours, but until.
I apologize for.
Oh, sorry.
To interject, I just wanted to make sure you were aware of a few things. One is, you're not required to have a meeting in September. You were required to have a hearing before September 10th. So if you wanted to skip next week, you could. Also, we're not set up to do hybrid meetings yet. Unfortunately, the Kennedy Room is going to be ready within the next probably month to 6 weeks. At that point in time, we will be able to do hybrid meetings. Oh, and all of the meetings are required to be public. pursuant to the ordinance.
Yes.
Okay, so that means we're in person. Okay, so in person, because we don't have to meet before the 10th, are we still okay with meeting next week, or do we want to not meet next week?
I think the question
Given-
is, be prepared for our first public meeting,
To be next
public
week?
hearing, our first public hearing before the 10th, if we don't meet in person.
I don't think you have to have a public hearing before the.
Can I ask a
No, she's just, can you restate what it is, right, can you restate what it is that we're required to have in place prior to the 10th?
If I can ask a clarification question, isn't this our first public
Yes.
meeting?
Yes, yes.
So I just want to make sure I understand the difference
Yes.
between public meeting and a hearing.
Right.
So, I mean, I understand, what the function of all, like the public meeting, I assume, which this is, we can also take comments from the public about proposed amendments.
So typically when we have a public hearing, we will notify the public in advance, we'll take names so that we have an order, that sort of thing. So the public hearings are a little bit different than the public meetings typically, but that's also your choice.
Will the public meetings be conducted here or in a different space?
And
open to more
if you all have the option of doing the public meetings here, in person or virtual. But yeah, this room is set up for these meetings.
It sounds like this meeting will counts as our September meeting, so we don't need to have a September meeting. Did I read that correctly? Because we need to.
She's gonna reiterate, I don't believe that's the case.
So page 7 of 11 of the ordinance states that the meeting must take place no later than September 10th. This meeting serves as the first public meeting, and to clarify, you don't have to accept public testimony at all of the meetings. All of the meetings, when there's a quorum present, it must be public and streamed by us. Does that help?
Yes.
Director Gracia, you said that, that's a wow. You said that the committee room would be ready for like maybe another 6-ish weeks.
Yes, I'm trying to be optimistic.
Okay, so we're meeting here.
Okay.
So I looked at the ordinance, it says we have to meet monthly, first meeting before September 10th. So we have to meet next month.
Yeah,
Okay, so makes sense.
so we have to be September, what day would that be?
This is August, so yeah, we have to meet sometime in September.
Next week,
Right, next week, the 6th.
because that's before the 10th.
So September 6th,
Although, wait a minute,
So we're no longer bound by the September 10th.
Yeah. Well,
Monthly meeting.
right, what I was going to say is that if I heard what was being said, there are two issues. One is that we were supposed to have a first public meeting before the 10th of September, and that we have to meet monthly. But those two are not necessarily the same, because we have to now hold another meeting. So we've now met the September 10th, but now, if we choose, we could have a meeting on the 15th of September, and perhaps our agenda would be a little bit more fleshed out than to be able to have some content to the meeting.
so then that takes away the first of the week, the first of the month.
At least for September. Yeah, at least for September.
Okay, so for September, what other Wednesdays? Would it be the following Wednesday, the 13th, or the Wednesday after that, the 20th, that we would like to set?
Selfishly, the legislative veto session will be in Jefferson City on Thursday.
Okay, so the 13th is out.
That doesn't mean everybody else should.
And we have tickets for David Sanborn that night.
What prohibits us from meeting next Wednesday?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It's not like a prohibiting, it's just that it gives us more time to prepare for a cohesive meeting if we have more time in between meetings. Is what's on the table.
We could shoot for the 20th, which gives us another week to prepare for October the 4th. Because that would be the first Wednesday in October.
Thoughts about the 20th, September 20th?
Well, one of the things I would suggest we consider is when we're going to have the public hearings, because we might then want to set up our meetings so that we, in fact, would have them in advance of the public hearings so that we could prep properly. We wouldn't want to have a monthly meeting a week after we were going to have a hearing, for instance. So since we're
all three
required.
have to be considered, the regular monthly meetings, extra meetings, and public hearings.
Right.
So we're scheduling all three.
Right.
So we have to get one done so we can
Yeah.
get to the next
Yes.
one.
But I'm simply suggesting that setting the hearings first might help us to frame where the rest of the stuff would go.
Okay.
And I guess the thing that I would offer, like just pulling from past commission experiences, like with the police commission that we were on for the chief, the public hearings it'll depend on what we decide our process is, what the phases are of it, how, when we need to collect for what reasons. So it might be, I think the first public meeting because we have business for today, that first public meeting will really probably be a lot about the process, like, how do we actually want to set it up? What are the phases? What do we need? What kind of input is needed? So I think if we get those meetings.
Yes, if we get the meetings,
that's
the
good.
regular meetings organized, I think we can determine from there when the public
For the month
meetings will
of
be.
For the month of September, the first week still works best for my calendar, and I think we could, even between now and then, we could put an effective agenda together for next week. And just, that way we're kicking off with the first Wednesday of every month is our meetings.
I would be good with that.
Yeah, that's okay. Particularly if what we want to do at that meeting, as is suggested now, is to look at process issues so that we can flush those out. The earlier we have that meeting, in some ways, the better.
So do you want a motion on the table for that, or?
We definitely need a motion for which day. We need a motion for whether we're going with the first Wednesday of the month or looks like the third Wednesday of the month consecutively.
Madam Chair, I move that we have our regular meetings the first Wednesday of the month at 5:30. 4:30. 4:30, sorry, 4:30.
In this location.
In this location.
In this room.
In this room, this location.
Okay. Do we have a second? Your second? Do we have any, the question is, does everyone agree by saying yes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed to the date and time, location? Okay. First Wednesday of every month at 4:30, this room is where we will have our Charter Commission meetings. Would we want to vote on whether or not, or what the dates of the public hearing will be today, or do we want to wait until the next meeting? To determine, since we have to do processes.
Can I make a suggestion? I would think for our public meetings, we can have multiple, that we might want to travel to other locations in the city to make ourselves more accessible. It's not necessary, but could. And so that might make it a little bit more difficult to schedule them now, although and I don't even know if
Commissioner
people
Grant,
would like that.
Public hearings, or you mentioned public meetings, are you?
Public hearings.
Public hearings.
Public hearings.
Yeah. So if we wanted to do, for instance, one meeting in the north, one meeting in the central, one meeting in the south.
Are
or
we
maybe
able
not.
to,
It's me again. You can come up with dates if you're interested this evening, but I would also want to make sure that STLTV has availability to attend as well.
are we able to go to different locations or just, okay. How can we coordinate the STLTV availability for other locations on those dates?
I'm sure the city councilor staff would be happy to help with that.
Thank you. So do we want to postpone that decision until we coordinated with the city councilor's office about availability for STLTV?
think that would.
Yes.
I propose tabling the setting of the dates for the two public hearings until our next meeting.
And we can also offer a prescribed amount of time at any meeting for any kind of public comment in the meantime until we get that hearing scheduled. So we could have time at the next meeting if people sign up in advance. That's how the Ferguson Commission would have that sometimes, even if they weren't having a, hearing
Right.
type thing.
I mean, I think we should consider what sort of input we want to get. I mean, it seems like we have a blank page right now. It would be interesting to hear citizens' views on what they'd like from this. At some point, we'll come up with some recommendations. It's probably pretty good to put those out there and solicit input. So those are two. Commissioner makes a good point about some geographic diversity, but if you wanted to have a north, central, south, you would have 6 meetings, 3 of each, which not a, it depends on the time of this commission. You're going to short shrift one portion of the city or a couple portions of the city if you just have 2 public hearings and one is pre and post coming up with some suggestions. So I think if we're good on we want some initial comment, and then once we come up with some ideas from that and other sources in our own, we have a feedback session. If that's how we would like to work, then I think we can think about how many hearings is that? Because you're right, here is not going to be the most accessible for people. Okay, but is everybody largely in agreement with we need to find out what people are thinking other than us and the folks we've talked to? And that would be a good public hearing, whether it's multiple or one. And then once we come up with some ideas, to get some feedback. Is that a good discipline to follow?
I like the idea of being able to ask people early on, because that helps us sometimes to identify issues that we might not have ordinarily thought of ourselves. Whether we have to do that only in a public hearing, or whether there might be another or an additional method to be able to seek that information. I'd like to see us be able to do it a couple of different ways so that people are not limited by their inability to be able to attend a public hearing. So I'd like to see some kind of a mix of the two. As I read it, we should have a minimum of 2 hearings. We could have more.
Sure.
And so we certainly could have 3 hearings. We could have an early, a mid, and a later, and put those in different locations. I think those are lots of, there's flexibility that we could build into the process. And I really think that when we have public hearings, it's important that we provide a venue that provides free parking so that the people who come are not limited by lack of affordable parking options. So those are just some of the kinds of things that I'm thinking of that we want to consider as part of setting that structure.
I think Commissioner White mentioned it, do we want to, as we're agendizing our future meetings, do we want to set aside an allotment of time at each meeting for public comments?
I think so.
Agreed.
I think we would have to determine how much time, or as we work on the processes of everything, what is being discussed at each meeting, and how to convey those things to the public so that it occurs in an organized fashion versus everything is up for discussion and we're not working our way through implementing things. So I think that's important too.
And to Commissioner Crossland's suggestion, do we have multiple ways for the public to give us input online, on paper, through the mail, and how would we get that out and promote that?
I think there's definitely a lot of precedent, like with the Stimulus Advisory Committee and others, for doing surveys and all kinds of stuff. And some commissions in the past have even worked with community facilitators to support some of those various meetings after the commission has decided what they want to focus on. So I think all those things are open to us.
And our staff can help you with any of the things that you have mentioned.
If I may, the rules that we just adopted, do provide that for all hearings, participation will be available in person, virtually, and by written.
How do we suppose, when we implement all facets of participation from the general public, how are those comments, questions, or concerns going to be processed within our process?
So So you all get to decide that, but we do have email address set up for the Charter Commission. We also provided that draft of a proposed form that the public could use to submit potential revisions and things like that. But however you all want to receive them, we can help to facilitate.
Okay.
So we spend next week's meeting drafting a proposal for how to take public comment. Is that next week's?
I believe it'll be the
Yes.
primary part of it, yeah.
And I propose maybe yes, but maybe before that is the, what kind of input when will be important. Something that was in the ordinance was informing it off of the Ferguson Commission process, which I think it kind of had 3 phases to it. And the input was kind of structured around those phases, which was essentially community input on the buckets and the types of things that could be focused on, and then meetings that focused on those various buckets.
Yeah.
And then a recommendation like drafting process, and then like an approval process. So that could be, that's one model we could look at.
Has everyone seen that model? We could probably benefit from seeing how the model worked for next meeting, so we can understand what that looks like for, I would say rollout, that's my terms. So if we could produce that framework, that would help everyone to understand what it looks like.
There's a Ferguson Commission playbook that was created after it that has some of that laid out. So I can send that around.
The agenda presents discussions, suggestions, recommendations for trainings and briefings.
I'm happy to go first.
Thank you.
I would recommend that you guys have a sunshine training from the law department in a closed session for your next meeting, if you all are open to that.
What does that training entail?
Yeah, so the sunshine law is our open records law in the state of Missouri, and so we will be training you on how you comply and notice requirements for public meetings, keeping documents and various correspondence available in your city email addresses and things like that for responses to sunshine law requests. So we'll go over the elements kind of the sunshine law, what's required of you as city officials, so on and so forth.
Would that be conducted at the next meeting
I
or?
would recommend to have that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
Can we do that in closed session?
Yes.
Yes.
And when I think of briefings, that would help start us out all on sort of the same foot, I'd like to recommend that we reach out to Ness Sandoval, who's a faculty member at St. Louis University, and invite him to come to talk about the latest demographic research that they've got based on the most recent censuses, not just about the numbers and the breakdown of numbers in the city of St. Louis, but the projections that they have been able to develop at this point, so that we have a better sense of who we are, but where we're going. Because I think that may play into the kinds of recommendations that ultimately we may have for the Board of Aldermen.
Is there any other insight we would want as it relates to briefings other than demographic information, as it relates to the work we're getting into? I think it's a little bit broader than demographics.
Question, will we have access to department heads? We have questions on how their departments
Yes.
run.
I agree.
Some of the structural problems that I think we probably all could have seen and been frustrated with over the years,
Yeah.
including through our elected officials, through the roadblocks that they've been into. So the question, I guess, would be, do we have access to those city department heads, so that we can look at some of the internal structural changes that probably need to take place?
Yeah, once you have decided what topics, you would like to address and cover, I can coordinate, with various city officials to get them.
But I think their input on what they believe structurally needs to be addressed would also play a part in what we would gather from the public related to hearings. They're just officials. So I think we need to know, in addition to other professionals, what the existing structure their processes and their hiccups and things are. So if they're impacted by the charter, we could at least know them on the front end versus as we're going. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree.
Agreed.
That would require us to know which departments we want to come for a briefing.
Figure out which topics you want to cover at that point.
Yeah.
Is there,
As we, I'm sorry, as we look at maybe that first phase of identifying the buckets, that will help inform then which departments we might want to hear from.
Well, and I think that we want to not just consider talking with department heads, but some of the county officials for the county of the city of St. Louis as well. And so that obviously will come out of the buckets also, but we need to be broadly inclusive of where, where we need to be looking and what they think might be some of the issues as well.
Could you just clarify, when you say the county or the city, what do you mean by that?
So
the way, yeah.
there's like county offices within the city government. So for the county offices, I believe of course, there's the treasurer, there's the
Department of Revenue.
Department of Revenue,
Collector of
the
deeds.
license collector, recorder of deeds. Those would be the county offices. But when we talk about the city offices in general, then we're talking about the supply division, the public safety division, and things of that nature.
Yeah. The city of St. Louis is so old that it existed before county structures came into being.
Yes.
And so we are
Special
not
ordinance.
part of St. Louis. Yeah, we're not part of St. Louis County. We're a separate county in and of ourselves. And so there's a layer of county government over the top of the city of St. Louis. And so some responsibilities that in some cities you might see actually being part of the city structure are actually the county structure in this case. So we need to talk to both groups.
And also note that those county offices are mainly governed by the Missouri Constitution, not so much the city charter.
And we will circulate org charts to clarify those points in advance of your next meeting.
Which maybe goes to a training that I was going to request is someone that could talk to us about the scope of what's under the Constitution, what the charter can even touch, and then what's a layer below that, and a little bit of structure. Like if there's someone that could give that overview, that could be super helpful.
Yeah, that would be useful.
I think that someone, I'm not sure who it would be, but the trajectory of what city government looks like. As we know, if you live here, you are very well aware of kind of the layered structure of government that some people may not be abreast of. So what's being mentioned here is the county overseeing several different layers of St. Louis city government. We need to know how that impacts the city charter. And I think that missing layer of information is necessary for us to understand on the front end. So we can know what that layout looks like. I don't know if it is in the organizational charts, how that layered structure affects or impacts the city charter, but I think that's important as well.
It was warrant some discussion.
Are there any of those that we could get at the next meeting? Is that unreasonable to ask?
It's only a week.
By next week.
I wonder if in,
That's what it needs to
I would
coordinate.
recommend that we focus on how we're gonna receive input and.
Yes.
And conduct the sunshine law training at the next meeting. And then for the following meeting, I can coordinate something, where we already just kind of overview of city government.
Okay.
sort of thing.
Okay.
Great.
Is there any supplemental training or briefing in addition to the sunshine laws that we need to be abreast of related to how we would interact with the public as it pertains to how we do direct mail campaigns or how we issue polls and surveys? Or is everybody pretty up to speed with, I would say, hybrid interaction with the public on getting information?
like an engagement specialist of some
Yeah.
sort? I like that idea.
Primarily just by way of data. And when the data is collected, how it's being analyzed, and how it's being communicated, and then transferred into information that we use as it relates to the work that we'll be doing here. But the agenda only is open to discussion, suggestions, recommendations, and we've just went through the trainings and briefings. So is there any other discussion or suggestions for next meeting?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Probably for Ms. Hamilton. Do you keep a running list of what's obsolete in the charter? There's some simple things, language that's not clear, that's not up to date, just kind of basic things we need to know of? No, okay. Thank you.
I think we could have some discussion on how we're absorbing the charter. Is everyone reading, have read, any highlighted areas, primary things that?
Well, the character in the first chapter really is. I've already begun reading it. I hope everyone else has done so as well. So, quite good bedtime reading. But ideally, I think that would be a good idea if we all could have time to where we could and maybe get together to sort of have like a, hate to say book club, but have some sort of understanding of what it is that we're reading, because there's reasons why I no longer read the King James Version of the Bible. So some of it's a little bit dated, but there are some things in it that we do need to read to understand, to know how to modernize for going forward.
Can we do that? Okay.
You may decide, though, once you have received the city government overview and talked about it, you may decide to divide the
Yes.
into various things, and folks take the lead on certain sections and such like that.
That was
may
more or
be
less what I was
something to
kind of
think
getting at.
about at the next meeting is how you might want to think about that for your next meeting, about how you might want to divide the sections, if that's something you're interested in doing.
I think that's a good idea. I think it's, if you haven't gotten through a lot of it, it is a lot to take in, okay? So I do think separating out the sections would help us to get a more broad overview of what it entails with those recommendations coming from commission members. And I think it would expedite the overall communication of what is in that, there.
Also, just as a recommendation, kind of dovetailing off of an earlier point where we began the meeting, something that Commissioner Riley asked about a definition of the word coordinate, right? So there's a lot of language I think we'll find within the charter as it stands now that could use some definitions and defining. So just a recommendation or something to keep in mind is really as you highlight or as you mark your own copy up, to be mindful of where we could be more specific with our wording, with our language, and maybe what language is outdated as a result of
when this
the
was
times,
created. Yes.
generally speaking. So.
So can we, let me suppose two different things. Do we want to read it in sections collectively, or do we want to delegate the sections separately and we all present them? How would you guys want to approach reading the charter? So that's the first thing that I think needs to happen in order for the briefings and the trainings and everything to set in. We need to be aware of what it is that we are addressing in the charter. So are we going to read it collectively, delegate, or read it separately? How do you guys think we should go about it?
Is it bad if I say both and, that we should probably all read all of it?
Yeah,
Because
let's read it all.
I do think that there are
There's
parts of
26
it that
parts.
interact with each other. But I also love the idea of like some kind of structure that allows us to like dive into sections or have work groups or anything like that.
Yeah, my feeling is that we need to read the whole, if we're going to be commissioners and this is our role, then we need to read the whole charter because it's all going to come into play during the year in some way or another. But one of the things I was going to ask the legal minds here, about meetings and stuff, there's 9 of us. And so once we've read it and we've set up a framework and stuff, then are we able to subdivide the work of the charter that needs to be looked at so that maybe, 3 and 3 are able to look at different aspects of the charter and then come back together and discuss it as a group? Or do we as a group have to look at all of this together?
And like work groups.
Yeah, work groups. To what extent can we use work groups within this and still meet the sunshine laws and the other requirements?
And where are we limited with
Yeah.
the approach?
Right.
So I don't know, Sheena, could you help
Yeah,
us with that?
you definitely use work groups, of course, anytime you have a quorum of the body together, at that point, you are having a public meeting, right? So you have to have that publicly, but you can certainly subdivide things and have people lead certain sections. That makes a lot of sense to do.
So as long as there are no more than 5 commissioners meeting in a work group and a subgroup, that doesn't constitute a public meeting or require a public meeting, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So
So we
3,
could do three, groups of 3, groups
Right.
of 4, as long as there's not 5 in it constituting a
Yeah.
quorum.
and we couldn't make any decisions, but we could be working through the information
You
to
wouldn't have enough people to
discuss.
make a decision.
Right, yeah.
You need a vote of 5 of you to move
I would
forward
agree with
everything,
that.
so.
I would agree with that. I think that it would be best if the subgroups occurred on top of everyone reading the entire charter so that we can get a thorough analysis of the entire charter versus a year going by and we're only halfway through doing it as a collective only at our meetings. Okay. Is there any other discussion?
And there's 9 members of our commission,
Mhm.
so there's 36 articles in the charter, so that's going to split up pretty easily with 3 each. So
26,
Actually, 26.
26, sorry. Not as easy, so if somebody gets shorted, one.
Some of them are probably shorter than others.
The,
And some
I
might make
think
sense to be grouped.
Right.
What would be helpful, if we can do it for the next meeting, is talking about looking at things in buckets. It would really help to have an idea of what buckets people are talking about. Because you could have 26, or as I read it, 36 buckets, or you could, maybe a bucket is larger and includes a couple of these. What do we mean by buckets? And I think that would probably be where, if that's the frame we're going to use, that we come back and begin to identify with some specificity what those buckets are, or at least start the process.
Or what we're looking to address in each bucket. So I think next meeting, we're looking at assigning the buckets of work after everyone's read all 26 articles, and then determining the framework in addition to the trainings and briefings next meeting. Does everybody agree with the structured agenda on what that will look like next week?
I like
That's right,
homework.
in a
too.
week we have.
Labor Day reading.
Yes, Labor Day reading. Okay. Are we okay to bring the meeting to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
I believe there's one other item on the agenda.
Are we sure?
Do we have to approve? Okay.
Did we talk about the Charter Commission form and adopting the form? I know we adopted the
Let's see.
the rules and procedures. Did we adopt the form also in that initial vote, Counselor? I don't believe we did.
Okay.
So we need to adopt the Charter Commission form, or at least a discussion around it and adopt it.
I didn't have,
Which page are we on the form?
You didn't have that on the agenda?
I did not see it on the agenda. Let me look at it again.
It's on the letter.
It's on the letter, not on the formal agenda.
Yeah, it's on the letter, I think.
Okay.
Would it be worth us, should we table that until we, or,
To look at the form?
we don't need to do it today, we could talk about it next week when we talk about format.
Okay.
Sorry, I was looking at the letter, not the formal.
Yeah, 'cause I think most of, if not all of, next meeting is gonna be process and framework and design of what that looks like. Okay, is there any other discussion, suggestions, recommendations for this meeting or next meeting? Okay, so I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
For all of us that agree, say aye.
Aye.
And for those of us that don't, say nay. Thank you guys for joining us for the commission meeting, Charter Commission meeting. Next week is gonna be long.
Yes,